Chapter 14. This is a social and emotional stage for middle adulthood. First few slides, we'll talk about the Erickson stage, generativity versus and immortality, and the idea of the midlife crisis, and finally we'll end with stress. The Erickson stage for middle age is generativity versus stagnation. Generativity being that you are working with the next generation in some way to pass things on, making the world a better place, essentially. Stagnation would be that you haven't done anything for the next generation. Generativity is linked to positive well-being and good health. Also, and not surprising, generativity increases from the 30s to the 50s. As an example, maybe you've been a Boy Scout leader since you were a kid, and now your son is taking on a leadership position in the Scouts. That's generativity. It's also kind of immortality. Your kid is continuing on with the work that you were doing. The book describes 4 different ways that generativity can be obtained. The first one is biological, so this would be having kids. Doesn't mean necessarily that you raise the kids, but that you help produce them. The second one is parental, so this would be actually taking care of the kids. They don't have to be biologically yours for this type of generativity. Work, so maybe you pass on skills to others, kind of like what I'm doing here, the teaching. That could be one way of achieving generativity. And the last one is cultural. You create or conserve some aspect of the culture that will live on after you. Another way to think about this, and it kind of relates to Frankl from the last chapter, is the idea of symbolic immortality. So if you have kids, you get to live on through their achievements. If you pass things on in your work, if you learn specialized skills or knowledge and you pass it on to others, you're passing it on through the culture. Maybe you write a book. All of those things are generativity, and they can lead to this kind of symbolic immortality where you exist symbolically in the culture after you physically have died. The 40s are a decade of reassessing and recording the truth about adolescence and adult years. So you start to think back and maybe reevaluate your opinions that you had when you were younger. For most people, this is a good process. You realize that you've grown from when you were a kid, that you have evolved, that you've grown. Although some people at this point realize, again, that we talked about last time, that time is running out. And maybe they've been wasting their lives. And so they might go off the tracks a little bit. This would be called a midlife crisis. That being said, however, this is not as commonplace as you think. Most people do not experience a midlife crisis. What they experience is a reevaluation of what's important, but that's not necessarily the same as a crisis. Most men, when they turn 40, they don't run out and buy a Corvette. That would maybe be, related to having a midlife crisis. In fact, for most people, there is an upward trajectory in happiness from early adulthood to late adulthood. So over the lifespan, your happiness goes up. So that's good news. Maybe if you're not that happy, at 20, it's possible that throughout your life, your happiness will go up. On stress, most midlife adults, they feel a sense of control is frequently challenged by outside demands in midlife. So middle-aged adults experience what's called overload stressors. They have the demands at work, and then you're also responsible for maybe getting your kids to all these various events, especially hard if you overschedule your kid, if you have them doing different activities all day long, morning, noon, and night. It's going to be hard to get them to all these places. You have to take care of the shopping. You have to take care of the cleaning. Maybe you have an aging parent that's moved in with you, and now you have to take care of them too. Basically, you're having to manage this entire household, and all of these things together, they're called overload stressors. Even though there are a lot of these stressors, researchers have found that on average, a sense of personal control peaks in midlife. So you might have a lot of stress, but at least you still feel like you're in control of what's going on in your surroundings, in your environment. Hopefully you feel that sense of control in midlife because it is associated with delaying the onset of disease in middle age. So people that feel like they're in control, essentially, those people that feel in control are healthier later on in life. As stress goes, there are also gender differences in response to stress. So when men face stress, they tend to respond in a fight or flight manner. So they either run from their problems or they dig in and get into a fight. Example, if a guy's employer is downsizing, he's going to cut some jobs, and the guy is worried about his future with the company. On his way home from work, he might stop by and get enough beer so that he'll be drunk by the time he goes to bed. That is responding in a typical male fashion, this fight or flight. He is essentially running away from his problems. With women, they experience stress differently, and so they're more likely to engage in what's called tend and befriend. They'll try to build relationships to try to alleviate the stress instead. Example, if a woman's employer just announced through email that there's going to be a restructuring of the company, some other people are going to get fired, she might run down the hall quickly to talk to one of her friends. And this is typical female response, to tend and befriend, to try to alleviate that stress through relationships. Why are men and women different in this stress response? Why are men and women different in this stress response? It's a really good question. It's a good topic for the discussion, so you might go over there and discuss that. Okay, that's it for Erickson, generativity, midlife crisis, and stress. On the next few slides, we'll talk about personality changes over the lifespan.